More than 2,000 coalition airstrikes have pounded these terrorists. We're disrupting their command and control and supply lines, making it harder for them to move. We're destroying their fighting positions, their tanks, their vehicles, their barracks, their training camps, and the oil and gas facilities and infrastructure that fund their operations. We're taking out their commanders, their fighters, and their leaders.
There is no denying Americans of every stripe are tired of being at war. An entire generation has now come of age and never known a true time of peace. The president believes his war plan will change all that, and indeed it may. There are those more concerned than before that this president is plunging America into another open-ended conflict for which there is no solid strategy of winning. Our guest is the former Assistant Secretary for Policy at the Department of Homeland Security, 2 years as General Counsel at the National Security Agency, now partner at the law firm Dept and Johnson in Washington, D.C. Stewart Baker joins us today. Stewart, thanks so much for being here. Stewart, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
There you go. Okay, had to make sure. I didn't hear you come back. And of course, with technology, we got to make sure. Stewart, there's an awful lot of snow that has fallen in the Northeast right now, specifically in Boston. They're buried in snow. And there are some people seeming to feel that in Washington, D.C. yesterday, the president brought the snow job to the American people and basically left a lot of people scratching their heads going, does the man really still have a war plan? And quite frankly, what's he really up to?
Yeah, this is one where it's obvious he would very much like not to be fighting this war, and he came into office thinking he would put an end to the use of force abroad and to unilateral executive decision-making about what force to use, and he's found himself actually being more Bush than Bush on that topic, taking existing authorities and stretching them far. He's trying with this proposal to thread a needle, to say, give me a lot of authority, but not as much authority as you've given the president in the past, because he is genuinely, I think, ambivalent about whether this is a good idea. He's written it in a way that I think authorizes ground troops, just not for very long or in any large numbers.
Well, Stewart, there's the point I wanted to hit you on here, because this is basically imposing a 3-year limit on American action. We have had guests on this show, innumerable guests, who have told us that the war we are in right now cannot be won in a few years. This is at least a 10-year war. In many ways, it seems the president is short-sheeting this, and he is simply putting us at war forever with this sort of a concept.
Well, I actually, he's putting us, he's giving himself as much authority as he thinks he needs, and he's handing a really serious problem to whoever comes after him.
Well, that's just it. Here we go. Aren't we kicking here's that old idea then, the kicking the can down the road. We've heard this a million times. This is a president who doesn't seem to want to take hard action. Isn't that fair?
He is visibly uncomfortable doing what he feels he must do, both politically and militarily, and any limits he can come up with, he's glad to embrace, especially if those limitations will mostly be felt by his successor.
Is he just making it up as he goes along, Stewart?
Well, all presidents do that. Yes, I'm sure he is. But that's the nature of foreign affairs and especially military affairs.
With regard to military, let me turn very briefly with a minute before we take a break and come back home here. There's been a lot of discussion recently from people, including Jay Johnson, saying that there are ISIS sleeper cells in America. You've dealt with Homeland Security. You know the groundwork. Do you believe that there are sleeper cells here right now as we speak?
I think that's probable, more probable than not, and we certainly should be acting as though that's likely. I don't know whether I'd call them sleeper cells.
Is that really just it now? We're almost getting into a little hyperbole when it comes to this. Certainly there are people here who believe in ISIS and follow the dogma, but it's not as if we have tens of thousands or dozens even in certain cities.
I think that's right, but it is quite possible that there were foreign fighters from the United States or from other countries whose names we never got, and whose travel to Syria we never flagged, and that those folks have come back to the United States with instructions to try to carry out an attack if that's possible.
Still be vigilant indeed. Please stand by a few moments. We'll head overseas with Stewart Baker and deal with the alleged ceasefire in the Ukraine next, and the hope that our new government won't ransack another American embassy. As a matter of fact, they already basically have begun to take American equipment. That's in the nation of Yemen. Two more hotspots to discuss when we continue right here on MidPoint. Back to work with former Assistant Secretary for Policy at the United States Department of Homeland Security, Stewart Baker. Stewart, let's go ahead and turn overseas right now. We are told that there is a ceasefire deal in place now in the Ukraine that will begin actually on Sunday. Russia, Ukraine, France, and Germany all getting together. Honestly, when you see Vladimir Putin sitting across the desk from three other people and promising a ceasefire, do you have to just give yourself a dark smile and think he's getting what he wants one way or another, and this is just not going to last?
Yeah, he is playing, especially Europe, but he's playing us as well. He's managed to increase the territory that is largely under the control of his special forces and the rebels, and now the West has more or less validated that new territory in exchange for the same promise he gave last time. So whether there's a ceasefire depends entirely on whether Putin really wants one. And right now, he may simply be saying, well, in order to head off the delivery of arms to the Ukraine, I'll promise them a ceasefire, and in a week, I can take it back.
How disrupting or how disgusting is it maybe even to you and others when you said playing the United States? It's not as if the United States is all of a sudden a new player and a rookie in this game. We supposedly have been trying to get good at it now for decades. But the fact that we have let this man basically play us over and over again tells us what about our leadership right now and what about our future, Stewart?
Yeah, from the moment of the reset, I think he has had our number and has done a remarkable job of getting what he wants and building enormous popularity by confronting the West, and yet hasn't paid a terrible price in terms of sanctions, certainly not one he can't afford to play. It's unfortunate. It's a squandered opportunity, not just for the United States, but for Russians. They're not going to end up better because of this.
How relieved do you think the president is when he got first word of this? Because certainly we've been watching here the last couple of weeks where people have been calling for arms to Ukraine, and the president basically backed off that. He has put that on the side burner. Now it would seem maybe he doesn't have to. I can just see the president maybe going, thank goodness I didn't have to finally make that decision.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's exactly right, that this will be put on the back burner and they'll say, well, we can come back to that if things change on the ground, but they'll be coming back to it deep in a hole that Putin has dug for us.
Does this also tell us a little bit about the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, that while we think that she is, and in many ways she is a quality leader there in Europe, she is the one who basically is in charge of this. She is another one who has let herself get run roughshod over by Putin. So perhaps we need to pull back a little bit and say that while she is an ally, she is good, she's an excellent leader, but there's still a problem. She's just as easily run as anybody else when it comes to this dictator.
Maybe even more so. The Germans have big commercial interests in Russia, and there's a long and really quite unfortunate history of the Germans turning to Russia and trying to work something out with them to the disadvantage of the West. I guess, it would be nice if we were tapping her personal phone, isn't it?
It would be nice indeed, but unfortunately that's not going to happen here. Let's turn to Yemen with the couple of minutes that we have left here. Our embassy is shut down. Our Marines are out of there. And also we are now, of course, hearing reports that at the airport, a lot of the Humvees and a lot of the vehicles that we left behind are now being driven through the streets by the Houthi rebels. It seems that once again we've had to run with our tail between our legs from another embassy, proving once again that the president was dead wrong when he talked about this being a model of democracy in that area.
Oh, it was never a model, but it looked as though it was in a situation where there was a stable a relationship that was keeping al-Qaeda down. Now we've got the government run by people who hate us, and al-Qaeda as well running around the country. So yeah, it's a big loss for the U.S.
Have we basically then in some way helped to foster what will become an even greater breeding ground, if you will, for al-Qaeda and for other terrorists? The fact that this administration and others have failed to get anything done in Yemen, it will only make it worse in the weeks and months to come.
Yemen is going to be a problem for sure. Yemen has been a problem for 40 years. It's so poor, and the residents are so hostile to each other as well as to outsiders that it's always been a very rambunctious and difficult to control place. But this has internationalized that conflict in a way that will hurt us for a long time.
It would almost seem as if maybe the president and other people are saying the same thing. Whew, glad we're out of Yemen now, too. We can put that on the back burner. And that, of course, is an absolute shame, because this is going to come back to snap at us one way or another. Stewart, always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to talk to you.
All right, take care. Now, the president may be seeking to cheat his way through a necessary conflict. And back home, we have yet another example of cheating in sports thanks to greedy adults. And it comes from Chicago. Chicago, the place where certainly a few underhanded dealings have been held in the past. But now we have kids who say we're champions. Well, you were, until the adults got involved in it. Stick around. MidPoint continues.